and we'll get back to the explanation of where we were before. Before we take the break, I mentioned that with Retain Last Search off in Voyager 7, we have two new features, a default tab and a save search. The default tab lets each individual operator who pulls up cataloging, this allows them to select preferred default searches and also to select and save specific indexes that they choose in the drop-down menu. It is independent. Search settings can be saved for builder, for keyword, and for index selection, so you can save default searches anywhere. They stay saved and in memory until or unless you turn Retain Last Search on. Whatever tab you choose to select with the default tab button is what will show up first. This example shows that a tab other than index selection is the default, because otherwise the default tab entry would be grayed out. So let me go into cataloging and show you a couple things there. Again, this is about the indexes and the impact to indexes, not new features in 7.0, but we have to talk about some of them just because it doesn't make sense otherwise. So let's go to Options, Preferences, to Workflow. And again, this feature is available not only in cataloging, but also in acquisitions and search. I turned off Retain Last Search. So now when I pull up the search screen, I have a default tab. I actually have the default tab sent to index selection, which is fine. I've saved the settings as title. If I go to Builder, I can actually choose to leave this as a title search by default or do keyword anywhere and save the settings. I can go to keyword and change this to free text search. I can't save settings here, it doesn't allow me to. And under index, let's change this to staff subject heading and save the session. All right, so now I've saved some different entries, and if I get out of search and go back in, it's going to remember what I saved. Okay. The default tab is index selection, so if I search from anywhere else, say for spices, and then I get a bunch of entries, then when I search, it's going to come back and come to the index selection because that is my default. If I save a setting such as staff subject heading or staff name setting, it will retain this unless I suppress the index from systems administration, in which case this will pop up an error when you come in. Under Builder, I can not only save the search in, but I can also change the drop-down from all of these to any of these to as a phrase, and actually save the setting, and it will remember that I've saved the particular setting that we're interested in. The reason I bring this up is that as you choose indexes here, the index has to be unsuppressed in the system. And in addition, if I were to change this to, say, staff name heading search and save settings, and I look for Margaret Atwood, oops, if I can type her name, I get a few entries here. When I go back to search, it's going to have saved this information. Now I'm going to exit. Well, actually, let me go into Systems Administration first, and then I'll exit cataloging. In Systems Administration, I mentioned that if you staff suppress an index, it can impact your staff modules. So let's go into Composite Definitions to the name index. Here it is. Maybe. Nope, not that one. Sorry about that. Heading list anchored, that's what I want. Oops, missed it. What should I get for going quickly? And it should be at the bottom of the list. because grouped indexes appear at the bottom of your list. So here's my name. My staff name heading and my OPAC name heading are in here, and I'll explain the difference between staff and OPAC next. So if I suppress this particular index, that means that it will not appear any longer in the cataloging module. Going over to the cataloging module and exiting, when I come back into cataloging and I hit search, since that was my default tab and the name heading was the staff name heading index was my default, when I hit search, it's going to pop up an error. I can't display this because index has changed. And it goes back to whatever the most searched index was in the list. Okay, so let's talk a little bit, now that we've talked about the setup in Voyager, and we've talked about the setup in systems administration, we've talked about setup on the staff side and how one change from one place can impact the rest of it. We're actually going to get into talking about the indexes themselves. So let me close these modules and get us back into the session. There are 4 types of indexes. There are heading, left-anchored, composite, and keyword. A headings index. This is used, the heading and left-anchored indexes are found in the same icon in systems administration. We just went in there to change that staff name heading index. They facilitate users' access that pertain to similar subject matter. So the headings indexes would be author, title, subject. Those are the most obvious heading indexes. And also call number is another heading index that we use. Each heading can be associated with bib records, or they can exist in authority records. The definitions are set by the system and you cannot change them. There are actually several indexes, and this is where Systems Administration Manual Appendix A comes in quite handy, because this slide is actually detailed in those tables in Appendix A, and hopefully during the break you pulled it so that you can actually refer to this if you feel like you need to. Be aware that some indexes, or all the indexes, do some bibliographic tabs and some authority tags. So the name index does what you would expect for a name, both authority records for name and bibliographic records for name. The name title index does both bib tags for name title and authority tags for name title. And I would expect that as well. Subject, same deal. You've got bibliographic tags and authority tags for subject. Where life gets really, really interesting is here with the title search. Make special note that the title headings index does not include the 245. It's very important for you to know. The title heading index, T-head and TITL, they do not include the 245. So if you're a cataloger, this is great. This is wonderful. I can see uniform titles more easily, et cetera, et cetera. But if you're in Voyager, you would never want to set the title, these 2 title indexes, as your default title search, because it doesn't include the 245 field. Because of that, the title left anchored index, which is TALL, and the title keyword index, TKEY, those are better indexes for Voyager. You don't have to use those, but I strongly recommend not using these 2 indexes. And then you've got a subject subdivision index, and that works again with the bib and authority tags. So there are also 2 types of searches, and you may have noticed up here that we have a staff and a staff subject search. This is the one that works in all staff modules. And then we have a subject search, or OPAC subject search is how it's labeled later. That's available only within it's available in staff modules and Voyager, but they have differences, and we'll talk about those. And yes, I have to correct the screenshot on this. A staff index, these headings will bring up all heading records whether or not they're suppressed from OPAC. So the difference is what's retrieved authority record-wise. In a staff search, it brings up all authority records, irregardless of whether or not they're linked to a bib. If you do an OPAC heading search, it only brings up headings that have a bib attached. There is a change in Voyager 7 that you need to be aware of. Okay, before an OPAC search meant only records that have a bib attached that isn't suppressed. With Voyager 7, OPAC now means any bibliographic record in the staff side, regardless of whether or not it's suppressed. In cataloging, you can use the OPAC or staff heading searches and retrieve bib records or authority records based on that. Note that in sorry about that. Note that in Web Voyage, ACK, and CIRC, you won't see staff heading searches. They just aren't available at all. So authority records not tied to a bib will not be retrieved. Now remember that in ACK and CIRC, we're going to talk more about suppressed records later. Which is up next, actually. There is a new feature, because in staff modules for acquisitions and circulation, you can now see suppressed records. These are now available. So naturally, you need a method of identifying those suppressed records. And in all the preferences, in all the modules, there's a color font option that lets you set background and foretext colors for suppressed records. What appears is the list comes up with a title, colored text. So in this screen, if I had set the background to a dark blue, then in this screen, this would appear and these three records would be suppressed. This is a great benefit to circulation, as sometimes people are bringing things up to the desk that should have been suppressed but made it out to the CIRC area without being unsuppressed. So this will actually help identify those pieces of information better in circulation and in acquisitions. But it's very important that the people set that feature. Okay, continuing on with heading search, index searching in the staff modules, you have an option of find or browse. A heading list can be retrieved in one of three ways, in both staff clients and OPAC, find, browse, and keyword. We're going to talk about find and browse here because they deal with the heading index. It's actually, the keyword index obviously isn't a heading index. It's not left anchored. So we are going to talk about that later. With the find index, you get a left anchored search for the input string exactly as is. So I searched earlier for cowboys, but I didn't get things that stopped with cowboy because it had to match the S as well. Browse goes into a rotated heading list. So it's kind of like a Rolodex, and what you see will appear at the top of the entry, and you can go forward or backward in this particular list. In the staff modules, you would actually select the heading search and then find or browse in order to determine what needs to be looked at. In Web Voyage, you have to choose in the setup side. On Web Voyage, you have to choose the setup side and change this in Web Voyage properties. So when you choose the subject tab or the author tab, you're going to use those special characters, the plus and the @ sign, to decide whether this is a left-anchored search, a find, or a browse. Notice in the lower right-hand corner, the code in search.ini or Web Voyage properties is going to be subject plus. The browse brings you into that rotated list, and then you would click on the front and background. Notice on the bottom, the browse list looks quite different in Web Voyage because Web Voyage has changed on displays, and you would do previous and next instead. Heading indexes, continuing on, they have filters available to you. For any of the heading searches, you can apply a heading type filter. This is only in the staff modules. And there is they can be suppressed from staff view. It's all or nothing for heading filter. It's either on or off in systems administration. Most people choose to leave it on. You can also do a subject subdivision type filter if it's applicable to the field. So for staff subject searching, you can actually choose to look for LC subjects with geographic subdivisions only for Canada. And this makes the cataloger's life much easier. Again, you cannot search staff headings anywhere except cataloging, so these features are not available in CERC or AC. Okay, let's talk about the heading index and what's retrieved. When you search a heading index, you retrieve the list that you would expect to see, not the titles, but the headings. The format of the heading list cannot be changed. That's set by the system. From the heading list, we can then retrieve specific titles. Notice that this screen snapshot of Web Voyage has see also notes, and there's more details available on the next slide. The headings list has 3 types of information. The heading itself, the number of entries is in parentheses following the entry, and you'll also see underneath any authority records. Okay, the # information comes out of this display. Just to let you know, I need to change that. So you get the headings, the number of titles, and the authority reference information on the Web Voyage side. On the staff side, there are 4 columns that will display, and again, this information is either an authorized, a reference, or a regular item. It might have notes available to you as well, the number of bibliographic records, the heading name, and the heading type. And this information is set by the system. To go from the headings list to the title list, you would select any of the headings, and you'll actually retrieve the titles. So in the staff modules, you'll highlight the heading with the bibs attached. It has to be something with a number, and then click OK. In the Web Voyage, you would click on the hypertext links, and that would either take you to a see also reference, a narrower term, or the entry itself. From the title list, from the heading list. The title list displays is controlled by systems administration. So what you see in the 3 tabs in, or 4, depending on how you choose to display this, in either Web Voyage or the staff modules depends on what you have set in the system. So in Systems Administration, we chose to display full title, author, and date, and we chose to display the index entry. Looking at the staff module, this is the index entry, Lyon's behaviors, full text, author, and date. In Web Voyage, it wouldn't show you the index entry here because it's above. I didn't put that as part of the screen capture, but you also see the author, the title, the author, and the date. You control the number of columns. You can choose to display or suppress the index entry, and you can have up to 3 fields displayed. Okay, how does Voyager index and search headings? This is a bit complex of an answer, and there's actually a handout number 2, that you should have printed and brought with you. And I'm not going to cover this in detail. If you want to know how it links this up based on the earliest discussion we had today and what's happening in the screen display, then you can read this afterwards. It's going to walk through what happens when you hit search. You do a name heading search for Mark Twain. It's going to talk about the heading list that appears, and it's linking that to the various displays in the system. Your normalized heading index, your display headings, your name, your type, your staff bibs. This walks through what happens behind the scenes. It goes on to show you through the heading and the title list how it's pulling the title list and the bib record information. It goes through authority reference records and how it gets the data for the authority fields. All of this is explained when pulling up the information on heading searching, linking to the indexing. So this kind of pulls together what we see visually with what's happening in the background. And it's more detailed than I want to get into today as an overview of the topic, but if you're interested in this type of information, this handout will be quite useful to you. Let's go back to the presentation. We're going to go into left anchored indexes from here. As we continue on, eventually we'll have to stop for the day, but I hope to get through most of the next section on left-anchored and heading indexes before we're done. Left-anchored indexes search from the left and move through the right. Depending on how you've set it, it automatically right truncates. The leftmost term is used as the entry point. The searches are configured in Systems Administration under headings and left-anchored definitions, and you cannot change the definitions. What's indexed? Authority records. There are actual A-heading indexes so that you can search just the authority records. This is the only way to search an authority record by itself. You can search a name index, which is bibliographic, subject, and then there's also remaining left-anchored indexes. These are all detailed in the Systems Administration Manual Appendix A. I'm talking too fast, sorry about that. And I would encourage you to look through that information to get more details on what to put together within a search if you're setting up information long-term or want to see the contents. To change any of these contents, you have to work through the Ex Libris office. Left-anchored call number is table A16 in the manual, and the call number indexes contain data from the 852 of the holdings record. This particular call number index does not index bibliographic information. You can do that in keyword indexes, we'll talk about that later, but this is mainly the 852 H&I. However, we've built a number of indexes for you, and they're listed below. CALL is the overall conglomerate index, the big one. But especially if you're a cataloger, it's good to know that you can actually pull information by specific types of call numbers. And each of those has a 4-letter code, which means that you can set it up as a command line search. You can also see it in the drop-down menus. Okay, how does Voyager index a call number? Now this works the exact same way as the bibliographic record, and I'm going to show you the handout. You should have a copy of it. I lost all my PDFs. Oops. So let me go over here and find that information. Sorry about that. That's what I get for closing documents and cleaning up after myself. Okay, we're up to handout 3. Oops, sorry. It's not going to do what I want it to. Okay, how does it index the call number? It uses indicator 1 to determine the classification scheme and how it's going to sort. And we actually code in the rules for call numbers to help with that sort information. It does go by a standardized call number, so there is a normalized call number entry that would make things all caps, remove punctuation, etc. So if I do a search for find PR9199.3 with a question mark, the index will bring up anything that starts with that. This period shouldn't actually be there. That's actually display information. When Voyager looks for that information, it's going to retrieve anything in the index that starts with that and has information after it. It's basing this on a display call number, which will pull up the information for you. But it's looking at the must-have from cataloging. The call number is following the H&I sub-scheme. When it pulls from the must-have master, which is what I was looking for, notice the display call number and the normalized call number. The normalized call number has replaced all punctuation with blanks, and anything that might have been lowercase is pulling into uppercase. When you do a call number browse, again, it's going to try and build a rotated index off of the call. It's going to build a rotated index based on all these numbers. So your other stuff, in my case that would be videos, is going to be in the call number scheme where it's appropriate. The first one it normalizes successfully is the type of index you use for the first set of results you retrieve. So they built an example in here with music. I mentioned videos. In this case, we've got music. So since the call number index is composite with both LC numbers and music numbers in here, you want the music holdings, but you're going to have to look within the regular call number searches. You can get around this when searching music or videos by making sure that they have a separate other code, and then use the MOTH or must-head other index to search the information in Voyager. So you can search the composite index for most of your materials, but if you have some specialized materials, you might code them as another type of call number just so that you can get to them more easily on a search. And again, you can read through this document in more detail after this session. Okay, you have a choice of find or browse, same way you do with the title index, and it works basically the same way. A find is going to return exact matches, and the browse is going to return a browsable list. Truthfully, with call numbers, it's often safer to use a browse until you know how the call numbers are working in your system. And the reason I'll say that is that sometimes the punctuation is off based on who did the cataloging when. So one person put a space between the PR and a number 9199, the other person didn't. And that can make a difference on your searching. You can limit the call number type, or you can, when you do a find, you can limit the call number type to a type of index. When you do a browse, you can actually do a type of index and a location filter. If there's time, I'll show you this in cataloging, but I think we're running low on time, so let's talk about Voyager. You can limit the call number type by indicating the specific index. If you notice the simple search codes below, you've got a call number index that is set to browse. You've got an other number index that is set to find, and you've got a Dewey Decimal call number index set to browse. The plus sign told me it was browse, but luckily the person who labeled this field also said it was browse in the search.ini below. However, in Voyager Properties 1, the lines for the entry are similar, but not the same because we have the multiple lines, but the codes are definitely the same. So you'll see call, you'll see moth, and let's actually pull that up. We have our title, we have our key, we have our author. Here we go. On this line we see our call number. Now the label only says call number because a student might not care, but for a reference librarian's sake, you might consider relabeling this call number browse. We don't have it activated, but you could do command searching as well. You could actually add the other indexes in here as you chose. The pound sign means lines are commented out. So if you wanted to create a new block, you would just copy a block of information and actually label this information appropriately for call numbers or for other types of call numbers. I would really encourage you to attend Voyager training for Voyager 7 on the new system prior to changing any of this information on the server. Okay, let's talk about composite indexes. Voyager supplies 13 composite indexes for you. And composite means that you can add or subtract from these. While you can't change the left-anchored indexes and the heading indexes, you can change what's linked to a composite index. You need to look at page A17 or table A17 of Systems Administration Appendix A for a full list. I would say that just the most commonly used in Voyager are TAL and JAL, title left-anchored, or title composite left-anchored, and journal composite left-anchored. And in cataloging, probably the ISBNs, ISSNs, various indexes, so that you don't have to search them individually. Let's look at them here first, and then we'll see if we need to go to Systems Administration as time allows. In the definition portion of composite, you can actually add components to the search. So we actually went into the title search earlier, and actually we did journal title, but notice that the main entry is the same here, where you've got succeeding and preceding titles available to you. Should you decide to change the contents of a composite index, make sure you document it. That's going to be very important. Let me go and locate that information for you. And Systems Administration, and we'll actually change one of the composites. Okay, we have been picking on the name index under composite. Here's my composite definitions, and it's a very short little list. I'm going to pick on the name index because if I forget to change it back, it's not going to kill me. We have our index definition. I can call this name. I could actually rename this to name composite. Under definitions, I have the option of leaving this list as is, or I can add information to it. Sort order is going to be title and then author. Frankly, if I'm searching a name index, I think it should be the, well, I can see why it might be title. You might choose to make it author instead. And the search results I'm going to show, I am going to show the index, which is the name index. I'm going to show the title, and I'm going to show the date. Now, this is another instance where the composite index of names might not be the author. So I can actually choose to display author as well as the last field. It might duplicate, it might not. That's up to you on whether or not you need to display author here as well. I'm going to save that information and minimize Voyager, go into cataloging, and let's do a name search. Cataloging desk. So I'm going to search the name index if I can find it. There's name composite. I renamed it to make it easier to find in the list so I can confirm I'm looking at what I need to. And let's look for Mark Twain. When I search for Twain under the name composite index, as it is, I get 41 records. Because I'm getting not only the name composite, but notice down here later in the list, the name index is the same as the main author. And right about this state, I've got the author is Samuel Clemens, but the name composite is still indexing under Mark Twain. Later on down the line, though, I have additional entries here where the name I'm pulling up is actually the name title index, and that this is a story within some other book. So I'm not getting just Mark Twain books, I'm getting everything. From my standpoint of view, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to change this so that we don't pull up auxiliary items. Under definitions, I am going to change this to be just the main name. I'm not going to do the personal name added entries or the personal name series added entries. And I'm going to save this. I had to leave cataloging and go back in for this to take effect. But now when I search Twain, I'm not getting 41 entries. I am getting, oops, helps if I choose the right index, doesn't it? Forgot about that, didn't hit save. Now I can search Twain in my name composite index, and I retrieve 26 records instead. If I go to the bottom of the list, what I find has happened is the name title entries have dropped off. Not something I probably want to do permanently in this particular index, but it is an option. I could also go into Systems Administration and say that I want more definitions in here. Something else, I might have a 99X name of some type, or uniform title name of part. Not exactly what would go in name normally, but it is an option for you to modify these particular fields. Let's go back to the PowerPoint. Here's a note on the journal title index as a reminder. JAL, the composite index, is the journal title left-anchored index. It's available as part of Voyager's simple search or basic search, and it's part of the index non-keyword search. It will only show up in Web Voyage if you actually set it in the webvoyage.properties. It searches the same indexes as the title left-anchored index or the title composite index, but it has an automatic limit for serials. If something doesn't appear when using a JAWS search, there's two things to check. One is to make sure the bib level is S in the leader, make sure it is actually a journal. And the other is to check your results tab in Systems Administration to see if perhaps your index is pulling up the index entry for preceding or succeeding title, and you might need to add title brief to the display. So this is something that you need to check out to see how you're displaying. That's why I made that homework for next session. You need to look at this in your system and decide how you want to go. Okay, left anchor to composite indexing. Let's talk about how that links together. Handout 4 contains a description of what's searched and retrieved when doing a composite or left anchored search. It provides additional detail that shows the linkages available for you among the different types of systems. So let me see if I can find handout 4. Again, never close your Adobe folders when you're doing a session, I've learned. Okay, here's handout 4. Here's an example using the title left anchored index. It's done with auto truncation on, which means if you do A, B, A, and D, abandon, abandoned, abandonment are all going to appear. When I enter this search in the staff module, the system determines that you're doing a tall search. It's going to look in the search parameters table for the tall items to see what's indexed. And it learns that from the search parameter tables that all these title index entries are done. Then it looks at the normalized heading in the actual data table to see what matches A, B, A, and D. So this is the actual code that looks at that information, looking at the normalized heading. And notice your normalized heading and display heading appear below. Punctuation's been removed and replaced with blanks. Everything's in all caps, which makes it easier to search and more consistent. The system looks at the entire list of bibs and titles indexed retrieved. It shows you that in the table. And deduplicates by the bib ID, which is why sometimes the heading that appears is not necessarily the heading that you would expect. It's not necessarily the title, because it's going to alphabetize these normalized headings, and when it finds a bib ID, it's going to delete the excesses. So from line 1 and line 3 and line 4, these are all the same book. It's going to delete these and keep only the first version of the index entry that it finds. So you have to be careful with all this, because the index entry that appears may not be the index entry that you expected. That's why you may want to choose to display not only the index entry title, but the brief title. With the bib record, it's not quite as urgent as it is with the journal title, because of preceding and succeeding titles. For more details on left anchored and composite index searching, you can actually see handout 5. And handout 5 is one referred to in several different places. Handout 5 talks about the search indexes and key information or choices you might want to make. I keep mentioning that you have to decide for Web Voyage what you're going to do. This handout will help you do that. So this handout you're going to use as reference outside of here. This is the second part of homework. All right? So with the second part of homework, you need to start thinking about which keyword index, which keyword format you want to use, or which settings you want to use in Web Voyage. And this helps to give you a guide. It's not a definitive, this is what you have to use, but it does give you a guide as to what you might want to consider putting in Web Voyage. You don't need to decide this information now, but you do need to decide before you bring up your live Web Voyage. You're going to play in your sandbox and decide how to do this. You have to decide between left-anchored searches and opaque heading searches. Which ones are you going to use in Web Voyage? For instance, null is the name left-anchored index, or you could use name, which uses the opaque headings. This opaque headings version incorporates authority records. This name entry does not. All right? So it's very important that you consider carefully which indexes you set up in Web Voyage. And if you review this handout or start thinking about it between this session and the next, you'll be able to better ask questions in the next session. That's it for today's session. Where we're headed next, let me go back to that. Oops. There we go. We're going to be looking at keyword indexes next, but given that this is a good stopping point for the day, you have homework related to journal entries and the display in systems administration. You also have homework to start thinking about Web Voyage.